now the ITV News in London with Charlene White.
Tonight, claims of more fire safety failings after a tower block fire in East London. Residents heard no fire alarms and were alerted of the fire by word of mouth. They'd already complained about the building's stay put policy.
Thinking what happened yesterday and seeing that fire, I don't feel safe to go back in.
Also on the programme, as President Zelensky addresses Parliament, the campaign to rename a street in London after him near the Russian embassy. The adventurers who took on a race with a difference, 230 kilometres over 5 days in the Arctic. And starters' orders for these school kids taking the classroom to the racecourse.
The different type of ramps is incredible, and see how big they are and how much the horses have to jump.
Good evening. Fire safety failings in the capital have been brought to the forefront once again after that huge fire at a block of flats in Whitechapel yesterday. The fire started on the 17th floor, but there was no audible fire alarms. Instead, residents warned each other to leave their homes. Residents have criticised what happened and claimed that they'd raised concerns over the building's stay-put policy some time ago. They'd also raised concerns over the building's flammable balconies, but although its management company had asked the government 2 years ago to fund their removal, no funds were made available, as Rags Martel reports. Indeed, Rags, thank you. President Zelensky has possibly become the face of the war in Ukraine as a wartime president that signifies a defiant country in the face of the Russian invasion. The recognition of his work has been admired globally, so much so a campaign's been launched in London to rename an area near the Russian embassy after him. We'll get to that in just a moment, but first, his work has also been recognised in the House of Commons today. He was the first person to ever speak directly to our MPs. For Ukrainians living here, the worry continues for their friends and family back home. At the Roundhouse tomorrow evening, 2 Ukrainian sisters known as the Bloom twins are performing with acts such as Sir Bob Geldof to raise funds for the Disaster Emergency Committee appeal. They spoke to Sam Holder. 2 incredible women. Well, Mary will have the latest on the Ukraine crisis when the ITV News continues with the national international stories at 6:30.
Coming up on the programme, an historic moment in the Commons as Ukraine's president addresses MPs. Just hours after his defiant video from the streets of Kiev, Volodymyr Zelensky became the first head of state to talk directly to the chamber. But the refugee crisis grows. 2 million have now fled Ukraine. Is help coming from the West? At 7, the Georgian Legion training camp that's welcomed 2 Brits to fight Russia. But are they right to join up? Plus, John Bercow is banned from Parliament after astonishing allegations of bullying. That and the rest of the day's news at 6:30.
12 Afghan women refugees have been invited to visit Parliament. It was an opportunity to talk about their stories and how they're trying to rebuild their lives here. And as Helen Keenan reports, the war in Ukraine was high on the agenda too, with criticism of how long it's taken to provide visas for Ukrainians. Stay tuned, we've got the weather to come. And it's a lot warmer than where these women have been running. Plus, what Camilla said when she met Camilla. But first, police have arrested a 60-year-old woman in connection with a murder back in 2008. Martine Vik Magnusson was a Norwegian student who was found dead after a night out celebrating her exam results. Ria Chatterjee is over at Great Portland Street for us tonight, where Martine was found. Ria, this is quite an unexpected development, isn't it? Okay, Ria, thank you. My guests tonight have just completed a 230-kilometre race running for up to 18 hours a day for 5 days. And as if that wasn't enough of a challenge, the race was in the Arctic, so it was cold. as low as -35, in fact. So how did they do it and why? Well, London entrepreneur turned adventurer Vicky Anstey and former Olympian Kate Smith join us now. Ladies, you came joint second, didn't you? I mean, this is no small feat. Why did you guys decide to do this? I guess you're just normal people doing extraordinary things. Guys, thank you so much for joining us. That's all we have time for, but good luck with the business, Vicky and Kate. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Right, continuing with a look at women in sport and to those who've helped make women's cricket a shining light. Marylebone Cricket Club only allowed women in as members from 1999. At Lord's, the headquarters of MCC, of course, a new exhibition on that history opened today on International Women's Day. Martin Stew went for a look. I think we're having a bit of a warm spell for the next few days, but with the details, here's Manali.
Making the most of it, whatever the weather. Octopus Energy sponsors ITV London weekday weather.
Hello there, good evening. Have a lovely evening. I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye for now.
Octopus Energy sponsors ITV London weekday weather.
Finally tonight, the charity Racing to School has been introducing young people to horse racing for 21 years. They aim to inspire young minds through free, interactive and healthy outdoor learning activities. Today, it helped the 200,000th young person gain access to the sport through Sandown Park in Esher. Antoine Allen has our report. That's it. We're back with the latest after ITV News at 10. Coming up, Mary Nightingale's got your ITV Evening News, of course, extended to an hour from now on, of course. But for me and the rest of the London team now, bye-bye.
A moment in history. Ukraine's president becomes the first head of state to address the House of Commons.
You now have the floor. President.
Standing ovation for President Volodymyr Zelensky. Speaking to MPs from his secure base in Kiev, he implored Britain to give more help to his war-torn country.
We will fight in the forest, in the fields, on the shores, in the streets. We will fight on the banks of the rivers, and we are looking for your help.
President Volodymyr Zelensky is standing firm for democracy and for freedom. In his righteous defense, I believe he has moved the hearts of everybody in this House.
Boris Johnson also announced the UK and the US will unite to ban Russian gas and oil. Now it'll hit Moscow hard, but Western economies will suffer too. Also ahead. A fragile temporary ceasefire allows a few to escape to safety. 2 million have now fled. At 7, joining the foreign fighters, the Britons heading to Ukraine, but should they be there?
Have you been given a gun as well?
Yeah, we will be armed, yes.
And a serial bully and liar. John Bercow's reputation is shredded by a damning report into his time as Commons Speaker.
This is the ITV Evening News with Mary Nightingale.
Good evening. In historic scenes, Ukraine's president has addressed MPs in the House of Commons, urging them to do everything they can to help his country fight off Russia's invasion. Volodymyr Zelensky was given a standing ovation both before and after he spoke via a video link from a secure base in Kiev. President Volodymyr Zelensky invoked Sir Winston Churchill's famous wartime speech, saying Ukrainians will fight in the forests, the fields, the shores and the streets. He said his people don't want to lose their country and he appealed for greater sanctions against Moscow. The UK and the US did just that tonight, announcing that they will ban Russian oil imports and products. But President Zelensky still hasn't got the no-fly zone he so desperately wants. Here's our political correspondent, Carl Dinnan. Well, our political editor Robert Peston joins us from the Commons. Now, Robert, incredible, historic event, an amazing ovation and reception for Volodymyr Zelensky. But will he be satisfied with what he's actually come away with? All right, Robert Peston in Parliament, thank you very much for that. And announcing the ban on Russian oil imports and oil products, US President Joe Biden said it will be a powerful blow to the Russian economy. Well, our US correspondent Emma Murphy is in Washington tonight. And Emma, a strong measure, undoubtedly. What is America hoping that it will achieve? OK, Emma Murphy in Washington, thank you. Well, as President Zelensky addressed MPs here, some of his country's civilians were finally given a safe humanitarian corridor to escape the fighting. This is the current situation on the ground. Russian-controlled areas are shown in red. Soldiers are advancing from the north, the south and the east. And several cities are now in a state of siege, with hundreds of thousands of civilians in fear for their lives. Today, a humanitarian corridor was finally established to take some civilians from the city of Sumy south to Poltava, but only briefly, as our Europe editor James Mates reports. And James is in Kiev tonight. So, James, what is the latest you can tell us about the progress of the Russian offensive? All right, James, all interesting stuff. Stay safe and thank you. Well, the UN now says more than 2 million people have yet left Ukraine since the invasion started. And while their friendly neighbours are more than happy to help, some are struggling with the sheer numbers. Moldova is a small country and has asked for international support. Our correspondent Peter Smith is in the village of Palanka, which is right on the border with Ukraine. And Peter, how are they coping there? Well, here, Conservative MPs have joined in the criticism of the Home Office's slow response in allowing Ukrainian refugees into the UK. Hundreds of applicants waiting in Calais are faced with a chaotic system. And that was matched in Westminster today with confusion over government claims that it had set up a new visa application centre. From Calais, Chloe Keedy reports on the difficulties people are still facing. Chloe Keedy in Calais, thank you. Well, there is plenty more still to come in the ITV Evening News, including preparing to fight the Britons heading out to Ukraine who have no idea what lies in store or even if it's legal.
The bag and the helmet are from a friend. I could be driving an ambulance, I could be driving a tank.
Finally settled, Prince Andrew has now paid the millions to dismiss his sex assault case. Plus, by an unreleased Ed Sheeran song was accidentally played during his copyright trial today. That is proven to be quite a court case. We're going to have the latest on that and more after the break, so do stay with us. Welcome back. Now, the ban on Russian oil imports announced by the UK and the US that we reported on a little bit earlier will not just hurt President Putin, of course. It's also going to cause economic pain in the West, with fuel and energy prices set to soar even higher. Petrol prices have already been rising in the UK at their fastest rate for 18 years. So the cost of living crisis is going to get worse before it gets better, as Hannah Miller now reports. Well, our consumer editor Chris Choi is at a petrol station tonight. Chris, a lot of motorists are going to be really worried about this. So how bad do you think things are likely to get? All right, Chris Choi in central London, thank you for that. A little bit of news just breaking this evening, and in the last hour, McDonald's has announced the temporary closure of all 850 of its Russian restaurants. It had faced criticism for failing to speak out about the invasion, but tonight the fast food chain's boss admitted they cannot ignore the needless human suffering in Ukraine. And the Premier League has suspended a broadcasting deal with unanimous backing of all 20 clubs. It means games will no longer be shown in Russia. So as the global support for Ukraine continues to grow inside the country, its people are resisting in any way they can. From building petrol bombs in their garages to repurposing factories to build military defences, residents are coming up with many innovative ways to fight back, as our correspondent Romilly Weeks reports from Lviv. You are watching the ITV Evening News. Here's what's still ahead before Emmerdale. In just a moment, why the Georgian Legion is training up Brits to fight in Ukraine. But is what they're doing actually legal? John Bercow's fury at being banned from Parliament. He denies being a bully and a liar.
This process stinks. Indeed, to call it a kangaroo court is deeply unfair and insulting to kangaroos.
Prince Andrew pays up and shows his face in public after settling his sex assault case. How Ed Sheeran serenaded the court during his copyright trial.
And why it could hit 16 degrees later in the week. Has spring finally sprung?
But before all that, ITV News has spoken to British men who are taking up arms and joining the fight to defend Ukraine. They're fighting with the Georgian Legion, which was first set up after Russia's invasion of Crimea. We followed two of the Brits as they travelled to the Polish border. Now, despite having no military experience, they told us they couldn't simply stand by as civilians are being targeted. Other British fighters already inside Ukraine say they've given up jobs and they're prepared to stay for however long it takes. And it's not yet clear whether what they're actually doing is legal. Our UK editor Paul Brand has this special report. OK, well, let's get an update on what's making the news tonight. Ukraine's President Zelensky has been given a standing ovation by the House of Commons after addressing MPs and vowing to fight on against Russia. As part of the government's response, Boris Johnson followed the US president's speech by announcing a joint ban with the US on Russian oil. Well, tonight, McDonald's has bowed to pressure and will temporarily close all of its restaurants in Russia. Now let's move on to some of today's other news now. And the former House of Commons Speaker, John Bercow, is a serial bully and a liar, an independent inquiry has found. It followed complaints about his bad-tempered behaviour by former members of his staff. He's now been banned from having a parliamentary pass and has been suspended from the Labour Party. But Mr Bercow told ITV News he is the victim of a stitch-up, as John Ray now reports. Now, Prince Andrew has paid the multi-million-pound settlement to the woman who accused him of sexual assault. Court documents filed in the United States show the Duke has settled the civil case brought by Virginia Giuffre. Now, he claims he never met her. Our royal editor Chris Shipp is outside Windsor Castle. Now, Chris, this is going to end the lawsuit as such, but it doesn't mend his reputation necessarily, does it? OK, Chris Shipp in Windsor, thank you. Bit of other news now, and two people have been released under investigation after a suspected dog attack killed a baby. The 3-month-old girl died after apparently being mauled by a husky in Woodland near Woodhall Spa, Lincolnshire. Police described it as an exceptionally sad incident. A court heard how a train driver crashed into the buffers at Kirkby Station just moments after sending and receiving WhatsApp messages. Former Merseyrail driver Philip Hollis caused almost £500,000 worth of damage. He was today given a 12-month suspended sentence. And police say that they are aware of this ITV News footage of rapper Dizzy Rascal smashing a photographer's camera. It happened yesterday, just after the musician had been found guilty of assaulting his ex-fiancée. Ed Sheeran sang in the High Court today as he defended himself against allegations of plagiarism. Now, the star is accused of copying a melody used in his hit song Shape of You. He denies the claim, and he used a song by Nina Simone to show just how common he says the melody is in pop music. Ellie Pitt reports. Now, Emmerdale's coming up in less than 15 minutes' time, but still to come before that.
People of Scotland, thank you very much. You are a legend.
The Glasgow bakery doing its bit for Ukraine through the power of pastries.
And it's been sunny for some, but will it last? I'll have the latest forecast.
Well, do join me and Alex for all that after the break. And welcome back. Now, some of us, it may not be feeling it yet, but rest assured, spring is on its way. Temperatures could reach as high as 16 degrees Celsius this week in parts of the UK, and Alex is here to tell us all about it.
Yeah, well, I think we could all do with a little bit of cheer at the moment, and I think for recent parts of the UK, they got a fair dose of vitamin D earlier this afternoon. In fact, if we take a look at these pictures, this was the Humber Bridge earlier this afternoon, sparkling in the spring-like sunshine, and this was pretty much the picture across many eastern parts of the UK. Come a little bit further south, this was the Norfolk Broads, Wroxham to be precise, the water glistening there, the swans also lapping up a bit of vitamin D, and nothing really says spring a bit like some lovely daffodils blowing around in the breeze a bit. Well, why is it all going to be turning a little bit milder over the next few days? It's going to have a rise in temperature. This afternoon we saw a high of 13 degrees Celsius, but as we fast forward into Thursday, we should be seeing a high of 15 degrees Celsius. This is all down to a bit of movement in the jet stream. That's going to be making its way a little bit further north, and that's going to allow some milder air from the near continent to feed up across the British Isles, particularly across southern parts. It is going to be fairly mild, temperatures at around 4 or 5 degrees above average for the time of year, maybe 9 or 10 further north. So certainly some spring-like sunshine on the way at times, but also the chance of a bit of rain out towards the west, much like they've had today.
OK, so that's what's coming up. What about tomorrow?
Tomorrow's not looking too bad out towards the east yet again, but out towards the west, I'm afraid we do have another weather front moving in. Let's take a look.
It's a cold and wet outlook, with some heavy downpours throughout the day. Heinz Big Soup sponsors ITV National Weather.
OK, so as we head through the next few days, it is going to be turning milder, as I was saying before, but also a little cloudier. The dizzy heights of 14 degrees in the southeast.
Heinz Big Soup sponsors ITV National Weather.
So is that a promise then? Spring has sprung?
Oh, Mary, don't do that to me, but maybe.
All right, not committing yourself, I noticed that. Alex, thank you very much indeed for that. And finally tonight, the Glasgow Bakery raising more than just bread to support refugees fleeing Ukraine. When the Kachak family saw what was happening to their homeland, they decided to help the best way they knew how. As our Scotland reporter Louise Scott explains. And just before we hand over to Raggy about what's coming up on News at 10, a little bit of breaking news on the war in Ukraine. And in the past few minutes, Poland has announced that it's going to hand over all of its MiG fighter jets to the US for use in Ukraine. It says the move will happen immediately, and it's called on all other NATO allies to do the same as a show of solidarity. OK, well, Raggy is in the newsroom. So, Raggy, what else have you got coming up on News at 10?
Hi, Mary. Well, of course, we'll be following up on that breaking news at 10. But also, we saw an incredible reception, didn't we, by President Zelensky to MPs in that historic address to the Commons this afternoon. And I'll be taking a look at what makes him the great global communicator and symbol, plus the Ukrainian Eurovision Song Contest winner singing her song again to raise money for her country. That's all at 10.
All right, Raggy, thanks for that. And that's all from us for now. I'm Adele's next from all the team here and in Ukraine, of course. Bye-bye.
When the world feels a little too much,